Take two of this intro. I actually had to go back and listen to the outro again to make sure I'm not completely repeating myself or if I missed something, because my first intro didn't work, uploaded, and it went off into the ether somewhere. And now I have a little cold because I was down in Wellington. And I think I need to look up my Wellington history to figure out why you would put that city there before I make too much judgment and complain about the weather and everything like that, like everybody does. And then, of course, you hear, well, you can't beat Wellington on a great day. And we can't beat Alaska on a great day either, but I don't live in Alaska. I wouldn't want to live there. But I hear it is beautiful for certain days of the year. Anyway, today we're talking to Gordon Russell, and what a cool dude. Great chatting with him again. He's my first number two, first time I've spoken to somebody again, and I think I could speak to that guy a dozen times and not get tired of it. He's interesting, he's talented, his wines are amazing, and he's a generous person with his passion and his knowledge, and it's great to speak with him. So, but once again, we are sponsored by the Gimblett Gravels on this current Gimblett Gravels little mini-series we're doing. So what you want to do is go to gimblettgravels.com, click on Terroir, have a look around, try to understand what makes the Gimblett Gravels so special, and then if you want to start your wine exploration, the best place to start is to the annual vintage selection. So if you go to About, you can read about it there, and then they have a little shop and you can buy it. And basically, every year they get a fantastic wine writer, and they sit down and pick the best. I think it's 6 Syrahs and 6 red Hawke's Bay red blends, and they do a little 12-pack that I only recently found out can be ordered by the public, but it does go out to a lot of trade and media. So, kind of a special thing if you can get yourself a case of that wine. I'm not saying it's cheap, but it is worth it. If you look at it in the context of what you would pay for equal wine of that quality from France, for instance, which, Gimblett Gravels gets compared to Bordeaux quite a bit, we're pennies on the dollar. It's ridiculous. And I think it's a matter of time before the Gimblett Gravels and Hawke's Bay are at that echelon. And in fact, they are becoming. We're seeing some wines that are pushed well past the $100 mark per bottle, which is a little bit of a newer phenomenon in the last few years. And with the way things go, older vintages, things like that, will become more and more sought after. So check that out. Also, I always forget to mention to hashtag Decibel Wines and hashtag Drink Decibel if you guys are out there. And if you want to follow me, at Decibel Dan on Twitter. And please go to the website and the store and check out the wines and use the promo code DB Podcast if you want to get 10% off any of the wines. Also, check out Esk Valley. I think in the outro I talk about that a little bit. Special place, and Gordon goes over the amazing property there and what's going on with Villa Maria these days. So check that out, and let's talk to Gordon. Cheers. Here we are. So, Gordon, you're my first number two.
Yeah, I remember the first time. It was many moons ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, time's going fast, but yeah, it's a bit slightly more official now. We did that at your dining room table while dinner was being prepared for us.
Yeah, it was a winter sort of evening, if I remember, a bit like this.
Yep. Well, I think that's what's well, that's why you're a good dude. I suggested we do it, and he said, not only that, why don't you come over for dinner and we'll open some good wines and everything. But now I got you on a nice Hawke's Bay winter's day. brisk morning. Wasn't too bad. I'm actually got the blood pumping this morning. We walked up the hill this morning because you met the cousins.
Yeah, I drove by that this morning and first, I don't know, just looked up and, that rocky sort of formation up on the hill there, and I was thinking it's a nice place to build a house up there. The views would be amazing.
Yeah, there's nothing but sheep and, like you said, and rocks and weeds up there now. But I've done a couple little videos from up there because you can almost see Crownthorpe. You can see the Ohiti vineyards from, I guess there's Peter Robertson's vineyards or leased or whatever. You can see the edge of the Gimblett Gravels, and you can see the ocean, and you can see almost both mountain ranges, certainly the southern ones, and then the Narroa River, which we'll obviously talk about in a little bit. And over top of all of Bridge Pa, you can see the entire triangle from up there.
Doesn't leave much. I mean, you can't see my house in Bayview.
Yeah,
there's not much else left.
It's kind of around the corner. Yeah, you basically just can't quite see Napier from up there. So I'm going to take those guys up to Tomato Peak maybe later today, awesome. and you'll see everything from there. Yeah. You basically see it all because you can see this sort of special wine region that we're in. But what's going on with you, man?
Oh, I don't know. Since we last talked, I mean, much of the same in some respect. Just, I say years come by and become a bit wiser and smarter and, new challenges, new seasons, new music, new foods. Life evolves. It's awesome.
I've actually got a few people that have come to me and said, I listened to Gordon's episode and I got like 4 new bands out of that. Yeah. I can't remember what was.
I can't help that. I'm addicted to music, amongst other things. So just forever reading blogs, listening to new music. And it's always, I mean, as you realise, nothing's forever. Nothing is totally new. It's just in some respects a rehash or an amalgamation of things of the past. But it's still... You still give praise to people who are clever enough to do it well.
Yeah, the conversation continues, and I remember I was listening to that guy. I don't know why I just thought of this, but that guy Michael Kiwanuka, that African English artist. Anyway, another set of tracks. I was in Italy listening, and I put them on, and this guy who spoke no English just kind of asked Mara, like, who is this, And he said, I like it, but it sounds like it's from 1965 or something, And... But he was like, cool. It's like, as it went on and on, he was like, yeah, I've heard that. That's cool. That's like but it's not quite Otis Redding, and it's not quite,
There's a mix of prog rock in there as well.
And it's certainly as the last couple albums have gotten a little more experimental in that sense. But it is a conversation that keeps going,
and you can apply the same thing to wine as well.
Totally.
So, wine... Just it's a reinvention of what has gone on in the past, and it's growing, it's becoming more interesting, more global. It's exciting.
Yeah, that's what's nowadays you really, really see the conversation, the international conversation affecting, I mean, certainly in New Zealand, even in my time here, we were not getting as much international wine readily available to the public as there is now. I was just up in Auckland, and, it's pretty exciting. It's first, the last few years there must be more importers now bringing in good wines.
There is, but I tell you what, I reckon one of the things which has really worked in New Zealand's favour over the years is that there have been some great wine importers, and many of them still exist now. I mean, obviously Glengarry and Peter Maud and so forth, and we've had an access to, whether it's buying wine en primeur, buying great international wine, and I've got to say, at an affordable price if you go back 25 years. And I think there's a lot of us who have had access to some of the world's great wines and been inspired by them and then applied it to our own grapes, whereas I think a lot of other New World countries haven't been quite so inspired by the classics as such, and have kind of been more inspired by the more international styles of wine. So, no, I think New Zealand's been blessed with its wine import business, much more so than Australia. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I was in Australia and I can't find anything but Australian wines in
Yeah.
anywhere, you
Yeah.
know.
Which
So-
might be a bad thing that we're just drinking international wine rather than drinking our own, but I think it's good for the international wine market that they're getting New Zealand wines which are well grounded, I think, on sort of, the classics.
But there's also, as you know, you just had a assistant winemaker for 4 or 5 years from France. That there's international people like myself
Yeah,
coming through and affecting the terroir and affecting the winemaking, and certainly this second wave, or well I shouldn't say second wave, fourth or fifth wave of with this generation. I know all my peers that are kind of assistant winemakers and becoming head winemakers, half are from somewhere else, and it's also because a lot of Kiwis grow up on an island and they want to go.
Yeah.
They want to go and work in France or America.
I also,
like that.
it's funny though, because I also think it's the lure of New Zealand wine.
Totally.
And
I mean, that's
how,
why I'm here. Yeah.
The uniqueness and the style of it is, I think a lot of young winemakers come here because they think they can learn from what we're doing here in New Zealand, and then realise when they get here that it's not actually about what we're doing here, it's about the place itself that makes the wines. But yeah, I've got a Canadian assistant winemaker now. I mean, prior to that, it was Pierre for a few years, and that exchange of knowledge both ways is really interesting. It's great.
Yeah, I know for a fact, talking to, it's one thing for me where I taste a lot of New World wines in Philadelphia and then decide, well, I see New Zealand as a great opportunity and I want to go and learn there and learn what they're doing. But it's a whole something different when somebody comes from France where they could easily stay there and work in an industry, but they see the value in something new and exciting, and maybe getting in on the ground floor of something, but also, I don't know, for me it was just smelling and tasting the wines from New Zealand, and I thought, what the hell is going on there? And because there is quality winemaking, and they're making classic varietals, but there's something totally different, and it is the place, like you said, and these certain sites, and just overall, I guess it's our young soils and interesting UV light and all that kind of stuff,
And I think we're unencumbered by rules and regulations as well. So you can plant whatever you want, where you want, and it makes an exciting and you never quite know what's going to happen wine industry.
Yeah. I think what's also interesting is the last 10 years even that I've been here, and you probably noticed it even, you kind of said in your last 3 years or 4 years since I've talked to you, because I think it was about 2012 or 13 we spoke.
Yeah,
Time flies. But that the industry kind of pivots pretty quick too, here where that might not be working for us and we're going to try this. I mean, not completely, but there's things that keep developing and changing here, and it's not so stagnant or like, that's what we have to do and that's all we're going to do, or that's all we're going to grow, and that's the only way we make wine here, or something like that. So this is exciting. So what's going on up the terraces? It didn't get washed away by cyclone. What was her name? Who was the cyclone this year?
There was Cyclone Cook and there was Debbie.
Debbie, I was thinking of Debbie. Debbie does deluge.
So Debbie came before Cook. Cook obviously was recognised earlier, but took a slow path to get here. So yes, one was rain and one was wind. Both of which we had our grapes off before they were an issue, and in terms of the terraces vineyard itself, I mean, there was no issues. But the more time I spend making wine from that site, the more I realise how unique and how beautiful it is. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's such a... What's the percentage of what's grown there again? I want to toot the Malbec horn, obviously.
Well, it's a Malbec-based wine, which makes it unique. So it depends. I mean, generally around 40% Malbec, and then the next 60% between Merlot and Cabernet Franc.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on the harvest, depends on set and so forth as to what the percentages are. But,
do you think Cab Sav would do okay up there? Or?
There was Cab Sav in there initially, actually, but when it was first planted in '89. But unfortunately, Cabernet was put into the coolest part of the vineyard, and that wasn't realised at the time. I mean, it was where the sea breeze clipped the top of the vineyard, and it just in the end it wasn't going to ripen, and we used it till 1994 and then pulled it out. But yes, there is a place for it, but I think it's kind of settled into its own style, and I don't think it needs it, quite honestly. I think
it doesn't.
The fact that it's Malbec, Merlot and Cabernet Franc probably makes it globally unique rather than just New Zealand unique. The fact that it's dry farmed, organically farmed, the fact that it's co-fermented, harvested as a field blend, fermented in concrete fermenters. I mean, we're talking a wine which is, one off in the world of wine.
Totally. Yeah. No, I was more asking about it just if it was a decision from the beginning, but obviously you guys have worked it out over the years and just kind of led by experience into this way. So if anybody wants to go back and listen, there's probably more about Gordon's punk rock history and how he ended up becoming a winemaker and traveling around, I think, on a motorbike or something like that from memory. But briefly, how long have you been at Esk Valley?
I arrived first of all as assistant winemaker. Grant Edmonds, who's now at Cellini, was my boss at the time. We'd been working at the Villa Maria winery prior to that. Came down together, and Grant, that was just prior to Christmas in, I suppose, 1989, and worked for as assistant winemaker for 2 or 3 years. In 1993, Grant was shifted north to Auckland, and I ended up taking over the reins for what was still, I think, the worst harvest probably of my tenure there. That was a tough beginning, that one, but we seemed to get through pretty well. So
yeah.
So since 1993 as winemaker.
And am I allowed to even ask what's all this new? You mentioned Villa Maria. It made me think of a new exciting development down the road from here.
Yeah.
And the fate of Esk Valley at this stage.
Well, a lot of, if not all, our winemaking will end up at the Te Awa site. I mean, with it, there we're building a whole lot of concrete fermenters, trying to duplicate what we've got at Esk Valley, and I think at the core of Esk Valley is 23 open-top concrete fermenters.
Absolutely.
Just gives us, I suppose, a uniqueness, the fact that they are, there's no temperature control, they're set into the earth and so forth. So we'll try and duplicate all of that. What actually happens to the Esk Valley site, I mean, there's a lot of history there, obviously, 80 years of history. Terraces Vineyard, our reserve Chardonnay block at the front. So going forward, I don't know. Seriously, I mean, I don't think everything has been decided yet.
Yeah,
it's ongoing. But
just
I
even
think
that idea that they're building the concrete fermenters there, I think you mentioned that a long time ago, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
that's sort of awesome to hear, So
well, it's quite an exciting project, actually, trying to the opportunity to design some new fermenters which are going to utilize all the experience, both good and bad, we've got from the ones which we currently have, and just trying to update them and make them better than what we've actually got.
So seal better or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, the ones we've got currently can't be used as wine storage. They're only for fermentation. So being able to utilise a concrete tank for storage in the classic old world manner, I like the concept of that. Yeah, having them so that they can be drained, so I've got skin door in them, rather than they, as we've currently got, have to dig them out manually.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting process, actually.
Yeah, and I would think, I think we've talked about it before, but one thing I remember you saying a while ago was whoever built because you don't know who built the ones up at Esk, right?
I mean, know the family that built it, but I mean,
they don't know how they nailed those kinetics like
No.
perfectly right.
No, and it does seem to me. So I've taken literally the exact dimensions that we currently use and just trying to duplicate that. I mean, it's 4.5 ton of grapes, and 4.5 ton of grapes without temperature control, given the right thickness of concrete walls and so forth. I think allows us the opportunity to make wine without having to utilize any outsource of energy as such to manage the
Yeah, well, it
ferment.
seems like it's just about enough where once the ferment kicks in, it would be generating just enough heat. Where even certainly 2-ton fermenters in plastic seem to lose a lot of heat, and it's
Yeah.
tough keeping that temperature up. You end up putting heating pads on them and wrapping them in
Yeah,
insulation. And it's like if you can pull that all off with concrete, it's just magical. I bet.
yeah, been there. Concrete seems to absorb fermentation temperature and hold it for a significant period. So, you can get to the peak of ferment and then coming down the other side, there's just enough residual warmth in the concrete to, for us, I mean, we haven't had a stuck ferment in those fermenters for years.
Is it generally wild in there? Or?
Depends on the harvest. I mean, if
But there's got to be some latent stuff in
Oh
there.
yeah, of course. God, absolutely. I mean, I wonder how wild our yeasts are. I mean, I think best just saying uninoculated musts or uninoculated juices these days. I mean, there's 15 years worth of commercial yeasts that have, are
They're
living in
battling it
every
out.
crevasse in the place. So
Well, I found it pretty funny. This year I did a bit of Malbec in a fermenter I borrowed from William Murdoch, who is all organic, and they do all wild ferments there. And I've never had a ferment just like about 2.5 days in, just took off, never had an issue, never went stinky, completely finished off dry, was, not an issue at all. In a tough year where, we weren't talking about the cleanest fruit coming through, but no issue.
Yeah.
It was pretty remarkable, and I thought, there's probably some latent stuff hanging on there.
yeah,
'cause
probably.
I didn't even really have to warm it up; it just kind of took off. So I think there's more and more of that going on, probably in the vineyards too.
I'd say so. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so,
I think it's the one way to make. If you're going to make unique wine and it's going to have your personal stamp on it. I mean, why introduce, products which are produced or, manufactured elsewhere in terms of commercialized yeasts and so forth. I mean, if you want a truly unique product, you've got to just let your landscape and your winery do it for you.
So, getting on now to the matter at hand. Which wines from Esk Valley are Gimblett Gravels wines? Obviously, you make like Gimblett Gravels, and
We make a selection. I'll start with the white, which is Verdelho. So it depends very much on the harvest itself,
That's
whether
unique.
whether our plantings in the gravels give us enough fruit to meet our case expectations or to meet our demand. We used to get maybe 15 tonne a harvest out of Gimblett Gravels block. 2016 it was down to 2.9 or 3, something ridiculous. This year I think it was about 7. But we also have planted another block which is in the Joseph Solar vineyard, which we use to supplement our Verdelho production if our Gimblett Gravels block doesn't give us our requirement. So ideally that's Gimblett Gravels. I think the Verdelho on the Gravels, I mean, who would have thought? And the only reason we planted there was because we didn't want to lose control of it and we wanted to plant in a company vineyard. And it was the only company vineyard we owned at the time that had a bit of, beer dirt on it. So that's interesting wine.
Well, we'll pause there for a second because it shows, I think I mentioned this when I was speaking to Ali, that Villa Maria is always, within the group and the wineries, there's always they're doing interesting single varietal, single vineyard things. And so, where did that come from? Where did Verdelho?
Well, I mean, it sounds, I mean, it sounds interesting now, but it was even more interesting perhaps in 1998 when we planted it. 5 years prior, I had attended a company workshop as such. It was called Towards 2000, and it was part of it was what varieties aren't planted could we plant, and Verdelho was one which was becoming popular in Australia. And these old Verdelho vines, which I'm sure were first taken to make Madeira style fortified wine, had been turned into dry table wine, and no one had ever, I would say, imagined doing that. But it was becoming popular in Australia pre-Sauvignon Blanc days, dare I say. So here's a variety which retains its acidity, has low pH, ripens easily, making fresh and crisp Australian seafood white. And I mean, I knew of it and thought, wow, be something, I'd like to give that a crack. That can be my project as such. And it took us 5 years to get the plant material through quarantine, to propagate it up, and then finally put it into the Gimblett Gravels. And we end up, for years learning about what is a unique and pretty weird variety, dare I say. It's got tiny berries, thick skins, loose bunch. I mean, so loose, in fact, sometimes it's got like 2 berries in the bunch, and those are the problem. That's ultimately been the problem with it. But low pH, ripens really early in the season. We've harvested in February before. A lot of acidity and pretty unique aromatic profile, and passion fruit, mandarin. Exotic and really interesting wine. And
No, I always, if I see that on a list, I always go for it. The old Chenin that you guys make. But Portuguese varietal, cousins maybe elsewhere.
Well, I think in terms of flavour profile and style of wine, it's similarity to Albarino can't be overlooked.
Totally.
And also Gadeo or Gadello, very similar. So those Galician whites or whatever, it is effectively one of those, very much in that family anyway. So great resistance to botrytis, handles the wettest years easily. I mean, we've just had a sort of wet year where sugars have been noticeably low across all our varietals, but we still harvested the Verdelho at around 23 bricks, which, I mean, I'd probably question that there's anything out, in clean condition as well. So, that probably says a lot about its potential.
Cool. And then other wines?
Gimblett Gravels, yeah.
So white's another white from there?
No, that's a white, but I do think, funnily enough, that the Gravels themselves aren't. They can make some pretty good white wine. And I think, Craggy Range and ourselves and previous, former years when we had Chardonnay planted in the Gravels, it seems that white wines grown in those gravel soils make wine with low pH a real mineral sort of aspect to it, which is unique. Early ripening, which is good, and make really elegant styles of white wine.
Do you think there's any white varietals that we're missing the boat on out there that we should try in the Gravels? Even just
I think if Verdelho's worked, I mean, Albarino certainly, and Opportunity. I mean, like I said, I've always liked the Chardonnays that come from there. I mean, if you go back actually to, when was the last time? 1998, I think. We had some Chenin Blanc growing in the Gravels as well, and it used to make amazing wine, both sweet and dry style. So I think the potential of those Gravels for white wine is untapped, and it'd be interesting to see what happens. But, why, in many respects, I suppose, are you going to plant what is recognised as being, a blessed site for red wines, which won't grow anywhere else? Why would you sort of fill it with whites that potentially can be grown elsewhere? So, that it'll be interesting to see what develops with time. So what else have we got planted in there? We also make a commercial red wine, which we label Gimblett Gravels Merlot Cabernet Malbec. The volume of that is up to around 10,000 cases, all made in in small batches in the winery from our Gimblett vineyards, all aged in French oak barrels for a year. Literally made by hand in the cellar. I mean, you've been to our cellar. I mean, there's no barrel racks.
It's all way.
it's all stacked by hand, and it's all racked, 2 to 4 times depending on the vintage. It's a handmade wine at, I think, reasonable volumes and sold at an incredibly reasonable price. We make reserve bottlings of Merlot, Cabernet, Malbec, Cabernet Franc, whatever the vintage dictates, which I think over time has been regarded as a classic and famous New Zealand red wine. And also we make some Syrahs as well. So no, we're in big in the Gravels and utilise the name and the quality of the soils and climate and so forth to.
And I'm sure there's sites that are specifically, we know Gordon's going to get this fruit, but does it come down to it some years where within the group, without getting into the politics too much, that you say, hey, we'll take on this, or we're going to experiment, or no, this is going to go to the villa,
No, I mean, funnily enough, not really. I mean, we have, we've, as a company, have substantial holdings in the Gimblett Gravels, but it's all been subdivided up to, to Vidal, Te Awa, Thornbury, Villa Maria, Esk Valley. We've all got our own individual plots, which we have learnt. I mean, I've certainly learnt over time what each of those individual sites is good for. I mean, there's certain Merlot blocks which make pretty wine. There's certain Merlot blocks I get which make wine with a strong tannic backbone, and I allow them, I don't force my hand with them. I just let them do what they do naturally and utilise that each year in a blend for a specific purpose. And, I mean, Hugh and the others in the group would be doing exactly the same thing. So, yeah.
Do you see, with this new winery coming up, I'm certainly going to have a lot more interaction. Not that I've worked for Villa Maria in the past, and I saw just firsthand, just by being a waiter and working in the tasting room and a little bit in the vineyard and in the winery, that you guys meet quite, regularly and discuss things, which is really good to see. There seems to be a pretty good amount of communication between winemakers and viticulturists and growers and all that. But I would think with this new winery coming up, it's going to be amplified a bit, and that your paths are going to be crossing daily, whereas you all be seeing each other's fruit, you all be seeing it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean, really don't know quite what to expect in some respect. I mean, Hugh will be saying the same, but I mean, our own, we've been living in our own cocoon, making our own decisions, and we still foresee that happening. But yeah, it is obviously there's going to be new equipment, there's going to be new ideas. I mean, it's like when you work at anything. I mean, if someone has success with something, I mean, you want a piece of the action or whatever in some respect as well. So, I think there'll be a lot of cross-pollination as such.
So you don't see, a Vital Reserve or Dello coming out anytime soon?
No, I don't think so. I think we're quite competitive in our own ways as well.
Sure,
I mean, we're great friends. We all got our own styles and our own thoughts on things, and I think they're all complementary, and I expect that very much to continue.
Well, just out of the 4 winemakers, you talk Richard Painter, Hugh Crichton, Nick Picone, and you. I like every one of you guys. I respect every one of you guys, and you're all really different guys, like very, very different. And so I think...
but we share a love of wine.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what it's all about. I mean, we got different hobbies and interests outside, but, get us together in a room and we love wine.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I'd like to be a fly on the wall, some of those meetings and stuff. But so what else, man? You're I caught you now, but you're going to be doing any traveling soon, or?
Yeah, quite exciting for me is we are going to, albeit small start as things are, but start selling some wine to Japan.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
get to go to Japan. Trip's been planned for late September, and I've always wanted to go to Japan.
Yeah, me too. I've been fascinated since I moved here. I just found that even from when I was at EIT and now working in the industry and back and forth to California, I found not that I had any problem with other other immigrants or Asian immigrants here, but I really gravitated to a lot of the Japanese and I just it's obviously like a refinement of the culture, and there's just something about it that is just I'm just so curious, and I really want to go, and I really want to see it firsthand. And I think they have a real love and appreciation of wine and New Zealand wine as well. And from all reports from a few friends that are in the industry, if you release a wine and it's bought there, they are going to read everything on your website. They're going to find out everything they possibly can about the wine, and I will be real curious to catch up with you when you get back to see what you know.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that one. I mean, I love Japanese food. I just, I can just, I agree with what you're saying. I think, if we can find the right placements, we've had quite a few visitors over the years, both from our distributor or importer and some key clients of theirs, and they all seem really keen on the wine, so sort of experienced the Esk Valley story and the place and so forth, and I think they all seem very keen to tell our story, to share our wine with, and I think just given New Zealand wine's sort of acidity and freshness and perfume and just the way it is, I think that if you can translate that to food, it's almost Japanese food in a way as well. And I just think that marriage is going to work really well.
I always joked around about how, even when you talk about a Verdelho, but even some of the, I make Viognier, and who would have thought these, Northern French and German whites would go so well with all this great Asian food. And we get it here in New Zealand. We're kind of like oddly, if you looked at a map, we're a little bit out of the way, but we're kind of the crossroads for that. Probably Australia is too, but they just don't make the same style of wines that we do, particularly in the white spectrum, but also with Pinot Noir and some of our more, we opened a Malbec last night, and my two cousins are here, not the biggest wine drinkers, but the one comment was like, oh, this is lighter than some of the Malbecs. It's a little more refreshing, and they found it, it wasn't like a big, heavy red, and I think probably across the board we can still make wines that are ripe, lush, good tannins, but they're still refreshing at the end. They fit.
My favorite sort of perhaps wine descriptor these days is delicious. And if you'd said to me 20 years ago, delicious, I would have seen it as sort of, well, not insulting, but flippant, and here was I trying to make wine that was complex, age-worthy, serious wine, which a wine connoisseur would appreciate as being, a globally great example of its type. Failing to realise in some respect that it's got to be delicious as well. If it's not delicious, people aren't going to want to drink more of it. And while they're drinking more of it, because it's so delicious, they then can be thinking how great it is and what a great example of its type. But deliciousness, and that comes down to acidity, balance, lightness, that's a key factor in wine
that's
these
all
days.
I'm trying to do with my wines is I want people to drink the whole bottle.
Yeah.
I want them to enjoy it. And
then
I think because I came from a restaurant background, like I knew the wines that I liked and that I saw were successful were wines that not only were they like, oh, this is an exciting, interesting wine by the glass, and then they'd switch to something else and drink a whole bottle of something else.
Yeah.
And I think you can be both. I'm not saying that. But you certainly can be heavy on this is so weird and interesting, but I can't take another glass of it, because it's too crazy. And, I think it's probably a personality thing too, and I certainly have some friends that are a little more eccentric or a little more, they're trying to do something really challenging and interesting. I'm not saying I haven't done that with a couple of my wines, but without a doubt, if I think if I can do anything is try to make and pick wines and fruit that I'm like, I know I can make a wine that are going to drink the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's really the name of the game, I
Yeah.
think, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's still fun that way and challenging, but you're...
Great wine should be delicious.
Yeah, delicious.
You know, I'm sure it all is. So,
anywhere else you're heading besides Japan?
I go to the UK every year. So, sort of spend a week or two there. Bit of time in Holland, which has grown into a really good market for us. It just shows, I think, the Dutch market, we were there on sort of at the very beginning. Been going there probably, if I said 15 years, I mean, probably wouldn't be too far off it. And, initially Dutch, there was a fine wine market there, but there certainly wasn't a widespread enthusiasm for fine wine. I mean, there's a lot of cheap rosé, and it was a very uneducated market, which is kind of strange given its proximity to the great vineyards of the world in some respect. But it's grown dramatically over the last few years. I see it's a really large market for New Zealand wine these days, and Esk Valley's been caught up in it. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So they certainly have the restaurants there. I've been through Holland. They have great food. And
I mean, our route to market has always been fine wine and the on-trade. So spend a lot of time visiting, independent stores, visiting restaurants, and like you say, some of them, 2 or 3 Michelin stars. And there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm for our wine. So, no, that's been good, actually. And it just proves to me that if you perhaps stick at it and get known and just create relationships with people, they can tell your story to their customers, and, it just works for everybody. So
yeah, and you guys deliver the goods, too. That's it's... you say 15, 20 years. I've tasted older vintages. Esk Valley's been making great wines and for a long time. So that's really important,
Well, I mean, one of the things that actually I found very satisfying is that I get to open occasionally 15, 20-year-old bottles of Esk Valley wine, which I've been responsible for making. And I mean, I think back to then, I think there was certain naivety in it all, and what I know now far surpasses what I knew then. But the wines have seemed to have aged really well, and it says a lot about Hawke's Bay, the Gimblett Gravels, the Esk Valley way of making wine. But being able to open a 2000 vintage, 1998, 1995, the wine's still fresh, youthful, life left in them, and classic, albeit unique examples of the classics. It's been really satisfying, that, actually.
I think one thing, and I'm certainly don't have the length of experience that you do, but one of the things I realized probably only in the last few years is I was not in a panic, but I do have an internal craziness when you're making wine that you're like, just from the fact of walking through the cellar and like, do I hear something dripping, or that never goes away. But when you're trying to finish a wine and get it in the bottle and everything, you're just trying to be as precise as you can. And sometimes you realize, now granted, you can totally fuck something up, and something could go wrong and you get a wrong reading. Maybe you're adding sulfur. I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
Thankfully not to my wines, but just an honest mistake between two parties, and all of a sudden you've got 60 parts free sulfur in a wine, and it's not going to be ready for 4 years or so, or ever.
Yeah.
And so that kind of stuff can happen, and it's good to be a bit paranoid about that. But moreover, I think I've realized that wine's really tough and versatile, and can if as long as it's made correctly, and I'm not talking about the style and how good the wine is, but usually you're usually pleasantly surprised when you open something that's been made well, particularly reds. But I've had some whites too.
I think screw caps have been incredible aid to aging of white wines, especially being able to open 10-year-old Chardonnays, and they look God, they're a hell of a lot younger than most Burgundies of similar age and so forth. And I opened when was it? Sometime last week, but a 2002 Riesling. So it's 15-year-old Hawke's Bay Esk Valley Riesling, and the wine was amazing. Yes, it was sort of had slightly deeper honeyed sort of colour and tasted like liquid honey and lime as opposed to some of its more I don't know, I suppose less
racy,
more elegant,
yeah.
Exactly. So but hell, it had matured really well. And the reason I opened it was because it was the first wine we ever screw capped, and it was just proof of how good a seal it is for.
I'm sold. Wines. I'm not going back. I've had some failures, and I wanted to. Like I made some decisions a couple times on some younger wines. Or wine I thought I'm going to release this early, and I actually put it under cork because I wanted it to develop quicker.
Yeah.
And because I knew because of the nature of my business, it was going to be, I was bottling in July and it was going to be, or August, and it was going to be, people drinking it in Philly or New York by September, October. And I thought, I need to get it going. But I've had failure on some of the cork failure on some of those wines, and it's just gutting,
Yeah.
And
it's one thing you can't control, eh?
And some of the more frustrating ones is when you open a bottle and it's not even corked. It's like, that's not right. That's not the wine I made. Something's wrong. And in hindsight, I should have just put it under screw cap and let it be young, fresher style for the first 4 or 5 months at least, and then let it settle in. But
it's funny. I look at it, and I mean, I know there's resistance from certain markets. I mean, Japan will be interesting. I'm not sure their take on screw cap. Certainly, Chinese, from what I gather, would prefer cork. Right. Certainly Americans and so forth. But it's what New Zealand wine industry is known for. And also, I look at the younger generation, like my children, who are 21 to 25. I mean, quite honestly, they probably don't have a corkscrew. Wouldn't know how to probably pull a cork out of a bottle of wine and expect it to come with a screw cap. So I think there's kind of a generational change which is happening as well.
Totally. No, it's happening. It's, for me, it was one of those things too where I thought about it. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, of course, like I'm in a lucky situation making wine in New Zealand where there's fine wines that are $100 more than I'm making that are under screw cap. Like, what's the big deal? Just get over yourself and put them all under screw cap. So that's what I'm doing now. So and Villa Maria was obviously instrumental to that. What was that, 2000 or 2001 or 2 or something?
2001 with the first
bottlings across the board. And I think
2002 whites, 2001 reds.
That's really great in the sense that they just said, no. I've had enough. I can't stand it, and and this is because it was terrible cork coming in. It's gotten somewhat better, but it's still. I got a good friend who, probably a mutual friend of ours, who, imports cork and things like that. But it's tough to. I buy screw caps from him instead. Yeah. So, and I think there is room to get creative, not only with the. The closure itself is what it is, but just with the screw cap and the look and the feel of it, I think we're at just the beginning of that, and they'll probably start coming out.
And there's the Vino lock as well, which, incredibly beautiful seal, having a glass stopper on the top of the bottle. But, I don't know whether the jury's still out on that or not. But, they're a pretty way of sealing up a bottle of wine.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So...
So, well, man, we just knocked out a quick 45, and I think I might leave it there. I don't know. Is there anybody you wanted to say hi to across the world? And you coming to visit them soon?
No, not that I know of. But it's funny. I had a young Frenchman work for me this harvest, and while he was here, he applied for a job, I think, in the Rhone, and the person at the other end said, "Oh, hi, say hello to Gordon." I worked there, in a previous vintage, long time ago. So, there's that's one of the things I actually, have enjoyed over the years is just each year having, young interns come to Esk Valley and making a whole lot of friends who have,
Injects
literally
life into everything. It's definitely. I think that's the sort of unwritten rule or great. What's so great about vintage is you get this influx of young people that are really excited and interested and asking a bunch of questions, or it could be somebody who's just in the industry for a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, there's this year I had a couple of young Frenchmen, and it was the first time they'd ever left France, and it's a pretty nervous thing to do, to fly the other side of the world, and I mean, not only to Auckland, but then hop on a plane or drive down to a place called Napier, which is a long way from anywhere. You pray that someone's going to be at the other end waiting for you and so forth. So
I know it. Trust me.
Yeah. So you got to play boss and dad and so forth, and try and make it a good experience for them. And I like that. I like what they bring, and I think that they also get a lot of benefit from coming here as well.
It's exciting. We had a young French girl, again, first time out of France, and had never worked out of the French industry as well, and she was just blown away by just some simple things that we did differently,
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. But cool, man. We'll leave it there. I'll let you
Awesome.
go. And thanks again for doing it. And I'll have to get together again in another 4 years or something after. That'll be like episode.
But things will have changed. I mean,
1200.
since we last talked, there's natural, all sorts of natural wine going on, and wine in kegs and wine in cans, and it's all exciting. It's pushing the boundaries and opening
I've always
up.
wanted to do a keg wine of like a white blend or something like that. Something that would be great by the
I reckon we
glass.
should be pouring them out cloudy out of the taps beside the craft beer in the liquor stores. People are getting seasonal wine, which looks like wheat beer, and they've got to drink it that weekend or whatever because it's going to go off just like beer.
Yeah, well, I got a buddy in South Carolina. They do beer growlers, and they're doing wine growlers now too. And it's gonna get oxidized, so you just have that's your table wine for the weekend.
Unsulfured, sort of. I like the concept of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wine in cans as well. I mean, it opens up all sorts of opportunities and places you can drink it, and the can can be a glass and so forth. So yeah, it's an exciting times, and it'll keep being exciting forever.
That's good to hear from somebody who's been doing it for a while. Cheers,
Well, you can never close your mind. You might as well, it's still exciting.
It's good that I think that's a testament not to you, but also to who you're working with and everything, that you don't get, because you see it. I see people get jaded and beaten down and stuff.
Well, it's going back to that music thing as well, where we started, isn't it? That it's just forever changing, and that makes it exciting. And
it is your responsibility to go out and search and seek and be a part of it. And sometimes I've worked for people that I'm like, do you guys even love wine? Like, where's the passion? And in turn, where's the passion for life? It's like seize the day a little bit. Miserable, complaining about this, and it's like, hey man, you're doing something pretty cool. You got a good opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, you have your down days, but it's pretty sunny today.
Oh, it's just now. It's nice.
Nice
Nice drive back to the ocean.
Cheers. Thanks.
Pleasure.
And thank you, Gordon. Like I said before we turned the mics off, we kept talking. I probably should have just kept him on. The guy's such an interesting dude, and very exciting for him and Villa Maria. But while you can, if you're in Hawke's Bay or if you're passing through, go check out the Esk Valley site while it's still open. It's such a cool piece of winemaking history, such a unique, weird place. And we talked about those concrete fermenters, and it's a unique place. Go check it out. Great wines, fantastic winemaker, just been doing it right for so long, and he's sort of a renegade amongst that Villa Maria group. He's sort of off doing his own thing. So, again, thanks to Gordon for doing it, and I get a feeling I'll be talking to him again soon. Thank you guys, and again, go to decibelwines.com, use the promo code DBPodcast, and don't forget to visit me in Wellington, 4 to 6, Colt Wine in Thorndon. I'll be there pouring some wines. It's free. Just cruise on in, casual, free tasting. Hope to see you guys in Wellington. Cheers.